All right, looks like we're back. So, welcome. My name is Terry White. I'm the Worldwide Design and Photography Evangelist for Adobe. It's my pleasure to do part 2 of my streams today, which is Introduction to Photoshop Part 8, which is Ways of Working Non-Destructively in Photoshop. This is for beginners, and we just had a great session on doing automation in Photoshop. So let me clear the stage here for a minute here. I got to clear some things open here in Photoshop while I give you some of the ground rules for those of you who are just joining me. So first and foremost, if you're watching the video on demand, whether it's on twitch.tv/Adobe or you're watching it on my YouTube channel at terrywhite.tv, this is a live broadcast that happens every Tuesday and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Today we're doing a two-parter, so it started at 10 a.m. and then this is the second part, which started at 11 a.m., and that is my Introduction to Photoshop CC, Ways to Work Non-Destructively. Also today I'm doing a first-time dual stream both to Twitch and my Facebook fan page at facebook.com/TerryWhiteFans. And just getting my notes here together and my chat window and everything else. And everything else looks good. And great to see so many of you still hanging out with me. Let me get my Facebook window back open here, because it says the last stream ended, which it did. And now let's go to the current stream where I've got, looks like 97 of you live here. Now 108. All right. I don't know what that button does. Let's see. Oh, that's a pop-out window button. Okay, we don't want that. There we go. We do want that. And I'm going to mute the sound. Okay. Cool. Glad to see you all back here. And before you ask an artboard question, can you ask an artboard question? You can ask it. If it's not too deep in the woods, I'll go ahead and answer it. But go ahead and ask your question. By the way, don't ever ask, can you ask a question? Just ask it. Either we'll answer it or we can't. And that goes about just anything on social media. I get questions all the time in my messages on Facebook. People are trying to be very polite, and I appreciate that. But it's like, hi. Okay, then I got to respond back and say hi, and then the next message, can I ask you a question? In other words, you're trying to be polite, but you're actually taking up more of my time because I have to answer all of those. Hi, can I ask you a question? And I got to say yes, and then they ask the question. So it takes 3 messages for you to get to the question. Just ask it. If we can answer it, we can. If we can't, we can't. And it's okay to say hi and the question at the same time. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and jump into our topic for today, and that is working non-destructively in Photoshop, and there are many ways to do that, of course. And today we're going to take a look at as many as I can fit within an hour. So I've got my notes here. Just want to bring my notes down a little bit. And there we go. And Larry Snow, welcome back. How was the trip? The trip was great. I think Facebook Live is better quality than Twitch. Cool. Looks pretty good. Great. Okay, just making sure I catch everybody. Since there's no background layer with artboards, how can I align easily? Okay, so a question on artboards, just real quick. Since there's no background layer in artboards, how can I align quickly? I select the background and a layer to align it to. You would just have to select something else. So you'd have to select, maybe make a shape that takes up the entire artboard and align it to that. Also, I think the Smart Guides automatically align, even though if there's nothing there on the artboard, they align to things like the center and things like that. So you can use the Smart Guides to get everything, to get the first thing lined up and then line everything up on that. Or just create a shape that's the full size of the canvas and do that. Then you can delete the shape. Okay, so now that we've done that, we answered that question, let's go ahead and get on to our topic. So I'm going to switch gears here. Let's go ahead and switch over to my desktop. And now you guys should be able to see my desktop. And what I'm going to do now is go in and talk about working non-destructively. And we're going to get some new images. I'm kind of getting, oh, actually, I kind of have some here that I didn't use yet. So let's open up this one. All right, so we have this Adobe stock image. And this is actually a part of the non-destructive workflow that we're talking about. Before I work with this one, I need to purchase one first. That one's been purchased. I could do that one. But we'll go ahead and purchase this guy. Okay, yep, go ahead and license that one. I just want one that's not watermarked and ready to go. All right, so while we're waiting for that to sync, working non-destructively, let me explain what that means in Photoshop, since this is a beginner session. And this is also our Creative Cloud learning stream, so let's go ahead and switch over to that. We'll get the official branding down there. Photoshop, traditionally, since its very first version, has been about editing pixels. But since its very first version, editing pixels means that you can physically make a change to the pixels for better or worse. And if it's for worse, you make a mistake, you don't like it, you want to change your mind. In the early days, it was very unforgiving for that. Whatever changes you made, if you saved it, that's it, you're done. You want to undo them, you either have to figure out how to manually revert back, getting the image back to the way it was, or start over. So some of the non-destructive ways that people worked on in the early days was just simply saving the file with a different name. That way the original file would still be there. If they ever needed to get back to it, they would have the new file with the changes and the old file with the old name. Obviously, that duplicates the amount of space on the drive because now you've got every image on the drive at least twice. And let alone if you want to save versions of it. So original, version Friday, version Saturday, version Sunday, now you're quadrupling and so forth and so on. So that didn't work out well. At least it wasn't efficient. The next way was in version 3 of Photoshop, we finally got layers. And layers allowed you to duplicate things in your file that you didn't want to run the risk of making a drastic change to. So for example, if I open up this image, this nice looking model guy here, and I then say, well, I want to make some changes to him. I want to get rid of that little piece of hair that he has there, and I want to get rid of, he's got a little blemish here that I want to get rid of. He doesn't, but I'm just making this up. Or maybe there's a spot on the suit. I want to get rid of that. Well, I can just jump right in now and start getting rid of those things. But if I do, then I'm permanently changing the image if I save it. So what people will tend to do is make a duplicate of their background. I know people that they can't open Photoshop without immediately, instinctively making a duplicate of whatever it is they're working on right off the bat. That's the first thing they do. I'm not that way. I don't instinctively do it. I only duplicate the layer when I have a need to. And there's a lot of reasons that I choose to work that way, but I'm gonna play it safe for everyone. So in this case, let's say I wanted to duplicate the layer. One of the non-destructive ways would be to say, okay, duplicate the layer. How can I do that? You can do it the old-fashioned way, layer, new, via copy, and it would do it. And notice the keyboard shortcut is Command J. So if I did want to do it instinctively, I don't even think about where it is in the menu. I just hit Command J, and that will duplicate the layer. Control J on Windows. So when I do it, that'll duplicate the layer, and now I've got a layer 1, and I got the original background. So my original background is my safety net. Yay, I'm not going to touch that. Nothing's going to happen. I'm only working on this layer. If I screw up, the background's still there. That's the first non-destructive way since version 3. Another way of duplicating a layer, just so you know, a quick way for drag and drop, is to simply drag whatever you want to duplicate to the new layer icon, and that will duplicate it as well. So in this case, it just renamed it differently. Background copy, same thing. So now if I were to go in and zoom in on this layer, and I want to get that one little hair that's sticking up, I can go in with my spot healing brush, and I can go in and, here, let's do this. I can go ahead and spot heal that out. Okay, perfect. Now that's gone. And get rid of this one little worry line here, this one little worry line here, and I can just keep going. I think I saw a spot on the suit earlier, or maybe that was on my monitor. Nope, it's a spot on the suit. And I can get rid of those. Okay, perfect, great. I retouched this image. I've gotten some things that I want to take care of. If I turn off this copy, the original's still there. So the original still has a spot. The original still has the hair. It still has the worry lines. That's my safety net. So that's my after. That's my before. So that's one of the first easiest ways to work non-destructively, is to work destructively on a copy. Because no matter what, at some point, you're going to want to change pixels. So what you're really looking for is a way out in case you screw up, in case you make a change you don't like. You want to be able to get back. And so a layer is a safety net. I can get back to the background. The background's the original. I haven't lost anything. I didn't have to save 2 files. I can save this with the layer, and I've got everything. The other way, and the reason I don't think too much about duplicating the layer right off the bat, is because Photoshop has some other not as safe safety nets built in that I use instead. Like number one, obviously you have undo. So if we zoom out, you have edit. If you make a mistake along the way and you say edit, undo the spot healing brush, that'll put back the spot. And if I say edit again, oh, there is no more undo, it's redo, put the spot back. And this has tripped up new people from the very beginning, because there has always only ever been one undo in Photoshop. Yes, since day one, Photoshop has only ever had one undo. So it's Command Z. There's a spot. Here, let me zoom in so you can see it. Command Z again. So it's either toggling on undo or redo. Now you're thinking, hey, it's 2016. Are you really telling me Photoshop only has one undo? Yes, I'm telling you Photoshop only has one undo, but it also has history. So the history is what you're really thinking of, the ability to go back by default 30 steps. So if you want to go do an undo or a step backward, and here we'll zoom up to his hair so we can see it better. If I do, I forgot the keyboard command, Command Option Z. Eventually I should get back, there we go. I got back to the hair. So I just kept hitting Command Option Z or PC Control Alt Z to keep going back in time. And again, you get up to 30 of those. Unless you change your preferences, you can get more. So the way I look at it is, I'm normally retouching. So it's rare that I'll need to go back 30 times to fix something I made a mistake on. If I were the kind of person that made mistakes like that regularly and I go past them more than 30 times and I look back and say, oops, then I duplicate the layer. Or if I'm doing compositing or design or brochure, or not brochures, but flyers or things like that, absolutely I'm creating multiple layers. So it just depends on your workflow as to which way you want to be non-destructive. Now I'm going to go ahead and step forward in time again. So I keep stepping forward. That hair should go away. There we go. Okay, so the hair went away. First worry line went away. Second worry line went away, and it would keep going. Now let's say that I wanted to step back in time, but I don't want to undo everything. Because in order to get back to the hair, undos are, or history is linear. So it's worry line, hair. Or hair, worry line, spot. But what if I just want to put the hair back, but not the worry lines, not the hair, not anything else? Then in that case, one of my favorite ways to get back is called the history brush. The history brush, think of it as undo on a brush. What the history brush allows you to do is brush back in time. Brush back to a spot where you wanted to make it, where you made a change and you want to put it back. So if I use my history brush, I can put back the hair that I say, oops, I kind of like the hair now, but I didn't have to put back everything else. So because I have multiple history states and an actual brush dedicated to history, I don't always make a duplicate layer. Because if I make a mistake in the process, I have multiple ways to get that mistake corrected. However, if I don't catch the mistake and I save and close the file, the history goes away. So that's why people like the duplicate layer, because they'll always have that history, or I'm sorry, that layer underneath to get back to. So that's why you've got both ways. All right, let me check the comments here, make sure I'm not missing anything. All right, looks pretty good. Oops, didn't mean to scroll down there. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, let's see. All right, I think we got it. Is PSB more stable than PSD? No, PSD is the ultimate. So hopefully that answers that question. PSB was actually a format really dedicated for when we were doing mobile, like Photoshop Touch at first. So PSD is the way you want to go. Good morning, artistic images. Artistic images, yes. How can you change the number of times you can step back in history? In the history preferences, in your preferences. Okay. All right, moving along. So we've got layers. We've got history. What else can I do? The other thing you can do is just apply a layer that's blank that you want to do something to. So for example, if I come here and I just create an empty layer, think of your layers as clear pieces of acetate over your original. And if you're working on a layer, therefore you're not touching whatever's below it. You're working on just layer one in this case. So if I pull down and I want to, again, I don't normally do this, but let's say I wanted to create kind of maybe like a fake shadow behind them. And this is going to look bad at first, but hang on, bear with me. I'm painting over him, and it's like, oh my God, Terry, you're painting his face, you're painting his ear. Well, I'm painting over him because that layer is in fact over him. However, if I move that layer back by moving it down, now it's behind him, and because of the background that he's on, I can't see it. That's why I was doing it on top. But what this allows me to do is I can do anything I want on that layer without that layer affecting my subject. Now, if I cut him out, then put him on top of that, then we'd see that very bad fake shadow behind him. And of course, I could finesse that, blend it out a little bit more. And this is not the shadow we want to create anyway. But I'm painting on a layer that's not touching my original. That's another way to work non-destructively. And like I said, in this case, this would only work as if we put it behind them and we cut them out, which we're not going to do because we've done many, many episodes of cutting people out. And just go back and watch one of those. But that's how this would work as far as being able to do something to a layer that is there, not there. And again, you always have back to your original. All right, so we're going to answer before, because I don't want to run out of time. We're going to answer one of the questions I've been getting since this whole learning stream started. And that is, what's a smart object? So if that person that always asked that question is here, today's your day. Smart objects have been in Photoshop now for the last at least 6-7 years. And I was trying to come up with an analogy for them the other day, and the best analogy I could come up with is you have a piece of art, like a sculpture. Let's say a sculpture, that's great. A little sculpture, a little figurine. And you want to protect that figurine. You don't want to make a duplicate of it, because that's what we've been doing. We've just been making duplicates of the layer to to not touch the original. But I actually want to do things to that object, but I don't want to affect the object itself. I don't want to damage the pixels at all. I don't want to damage this antique sculpture. So if I turn it into a smart object, what I basically have done is I've taken that sculpture and I put it inside a piece of Tupperware. That's the best analogy I can come up with. Now, the Tupperware is clear, so you can see the object. You can rotate the object around. You can scale it. You can make it bigger. You can do whatever. You can paint it. Well, not paint on it, but you can do things to it. You can apply filters and effects to it, but you're never touching the inside. You're only affecting the Tupperware, and because it's clear, you can see through to see the effect. So that's what a smart object is in layman's terms. It's taking your layer and putting it inside a protective layer called a smart object. So let me show you an example of this. And one of the best ways I can show you is we're going to open up a different image. We're going to open up this image twice. So actually, we'll do it with this guy. Let's close this. We're not going to save anything, because that was destructive in some ways. Let's make a new document. We'll make a new document that's paper size, and we'll just make it 11 by 11. All right, click OK. So now that's our new empty document. Now what I want to do is I want to bring this guy onto the document. Same guy we were working with a minute ago. We're going to bring him onto the document, and we're going to bring it onto the document twice. Now in this case, I'm dragging him over. Oh, is that the same guy? Maybe a different guy. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. Now, this is already coming over as a kind of a smart object. I'm going to say, no, just make it a regular image. So I'm going to go in and I'm just going to say smart object. Or actually, no, I want to rasterize. There we go, rasterize smart object. So this is just now a regular photograph. It is not a smart object. Now, in this case, I'm just going to move them over. And I'm going to bring them over one more time. And because I'm bringing them over as a stock images are smart objects by default. They're a different kind, but smart objects is by default. Okay. So all I did was basically bring the same guy in twice. The difference is, and I'll show you on the layers. Let's go to the layers panel. Notice the icon for the second one I did. It says smart object thumbnail, and this one doesn't, because this is the one I rasterized. This is the one that came over as a smart object. I'm going to show you how to make one, even if you don't have one that you can just drag over. But anyway, one's a smart object. This one, because it has that little icon in the lower right-hand corner, this one does not. All right, so we go back to the one that's not a smart object, and we scale it way down. So let's go to our free transform, Command-T, Control-T on Windows, and we scale him way, way down. Make him really tiny. And then we say, OK. Now we go to the same exact layer, and here we can even pull out a ruler guide. Command-R for ruler. Pull down a ruler guide so we get them the exact same size. All right, and then we pull over, and then we make this one the same size, the one that is a smart object. So Command-T, scroll it down, scale it down, same exact size. And then we say OK. Now, what happened to the first one was Photoshop said, you're taking something this big and you're making it this tiny. I'm throwing away all that extra data. I don't need it anymore. You made it small. The one on the right, though, is a smart object. And it's saying, you made the Tupperware small. And yes, I'm inside the Tupperware, but I'm not really being affected by whatever you're doing on the outside world. So that's what a smart object does. Now, why does that matter? Watch what happens when I take the original small guy that's not a smart object, and I make them big again. So we go back to, I'm not going to undo, I'm just going to physically scale it back up. So Command T, and you changed your mind 2 days later, so you don't have undos. And you scale them back up. And Photoshop has gotten a lot better at making things that were small bigger. But one thing you'll notice is that when I make them bigger, even with Photoshop's better algorithms for sizing, zoom tool, he's gotten, if I can go to my zoom tool, there we go. He's gotten a lot softer. Look at the quality. The quality's been completely trashed because you took something big, you made it really small, throwing away all that data, and then you changed your mind 2 days later when there's no undos, and you made it bigger again. Versus if I take the smart object, Command T, and make them bigger again, he's back to his original size. No quality degradation whatsoever. Because, if we zoom in, we can see him. Look at the difference. That's the original. That's the one that we shrunk down and brought back up that didn't have the smart object. It didn't have that layer of protection. Now, let's make a smart object from scratch. So that way you guys are saying, this is cool, I want to be able to do that. Okay, let's make one from scratch. Because while there are smart objects, there are limitations to smart objects too. So let's go ahead and zoom out. And that should show you one of the reasons why you're going to want to work with smart objects, especially if you're scaling things. If you're always scaling things up and down and you're trying to size it and you're going to use it at different sizes, always make a smart object. So that way you're always protecting the original quality. Okay, so let's go ahead and delete those two. And let's go ahead now, and I'm going to open up just a regular photograph. So let's open up. We can even open up one of the ones we were working with in the first stream. Let's go down, back to the desktop, back to one of these beach shots. We'll open up just any one of these. Okay, so we got these two guys on the beach taking a selfie, and now someone's taking a picture of them taking a selfie. So now we want to go ahead and drag them over to the other image. All right. Whenever you have a layer of any kind, it's a candidate to be a smart object. So we start with the background, we put a new layer in, and if we zoom in on that layer panel, there's no smart object icon because you don't get smart objects by default every single time. Depends on what you're doing. But if I go to my layer menu now, and I come down to Smart Object, Convert to Smart Object, that's how you make one out of one of your layers from scratch. So the reason I was getting smart objects from that library panel is because all of those are stock images. And when you drag a stock image from the library panel, it comes over as a default. It comes over as a smart object by default. But if you're making your own images, you won't have that luxury. So this is one of the ways you make one. So when I say convert to smart object, it'll do it. It's wrapping it in that layer of protection, that layer of Tupperware. And now it's going to give me the icon. The icon will look slightly different depending on what was the source of the smart object. This is one we did manually versus a Creative Cloud smart object. But smart objects are smart objects. So now, what does that mean? That means that I can't do something destructive to the image. So that's part of the restrictions. So for example, I want to paint on it now. Yay! Grab the paintbrush. Grab the paintbrush. Come over here. Notice I get a no sign. You can't paint on this. This is off limits because painting would be destructive. So while smart objects protect you, they also, in some cases, hinder you from doing certain things because you've said to Photoshop, I don't ever want to damage these pixels. Therefore, anything that would damage pixels is automatically off limits. I can't paint, I can't sharpen. I can't dodge and burn. I can't do anything that would affect the pixels because I told it to be a smart object. What I can do are things that are newer in Photoshop that aren't destructive anymore. So for example, or I shouldn't say aren't destructive anymore, have the option of being run on a smart object. So for example, I can go to my filter menu and I can now apply any filter I want that shows up here. I can, for example, apply well, we did a blur earlier. Let's do a Gaussian blur. Gaussian blur is an option. It comes up and gives me what the blur will look like. And I can tone it down a little bit if I want, but that will blur my photo. Oh no, isn't that destructive? Doesn't blur actually blur the pixels? Yes, it does. But in the case of a smart object, these are now smart filters. So the Gaussian blur is being applied to that image. And notice what it did. It applied it as a separate segment or part of that layer. So that means that the inside of this is being protected. And now you've blurred the Tupperware. So you're blurring your view into those pixels. Those pixels are not being touched. You don't have to worry about undos. You can save this file. You don't have to worry about history. You can open this file up 3 years from now, provided that Photoshop CC will open up your 3-year-old file, and I'm sure it will. But 3 years from now, you open up your file in your new version of Photoshop CC 2020, and you say, oh, I don't want that blur anymore, and you simply turn it off. Because this is part of the smart object. It's not touching the inside of this image. Now, if that's the hindrance, meaning I can only do things that are non-destructive, like filters, adjustment layers, and things like that, which we haven't even got to, then what if I actually do need to change some of the pixels? What if I do need to do something destructive to maybe just to a little piece of the image? I want to get rid of that one little branch sticking off the tree. I won't care if I get rid of that. I'm okay getting rid of that. Can I get rid of that? Well, if I go to my spot healing brush, which I use all the time, nope, can't do it. But you can. You just have to know how. Remember when I said it's like taking that sculpture, that little figurine, and sticking it inside a piece of Tupperware and closing the lid? I didn't say that. Well, you can open the lid and get to that figurine to do something to it and then close the lid again. So that's how smart objects work. How do I get to it? All you do is double click on the smart object icon on the layer. When you double click on the smart object icon, it's doing it. That will open up your original. So your original now, this is the one that you can go in and do whatever you want. This is the one where it's now you've taken it temporarily out of the Tupperware, you throw paint on it, you've thrown paint on it. You delete something, you break off a piece of it, you've broken off a piece of it. The smart object is still there, but now you're inside of it to work. So for example, this is the PSD format that the person was asking about earlier. So for example, if I go in here and I now say, hey, I do want to get rid of that branch, and I want to go in and paint it out, or heal it out, I should say. It's gone now, and if I don't zoom in and I don't do a good job, oh well, I'm physically changing the pixels now. Okay, so now I've made that one little change, and hold on, and I want to zoom out, and I now want to close this and put it back inside. So if I close this, Photoshop's going to ask me a question. Do you want to save those changes? Because you are physically editing those pixels. Yes or no? Yes, I do. It'll close it after it finishes. It's saving it now. Once it's finished saving it, it'll close it and return you back to, which is, it's right here. It's in another tab, or in that tab. I can't remember which one's which. But it's in another tab, and it will actually show you, probably this one. It will actually show you the image. So closing this big file, saving this big file, and it always gets to 98% and just makes you wait like the whole time again. Just kidding. It's thinking about it. All right, and there we are. So it's closed it, and look, that little branch just disappeared. The Gaussian blur is still there because the Gaussian blur has been applied to the smart object. What we did was go inside that smart object, edit something, and come back and put it back in. And so we put it back in the Gaussian blurred smart object. And so the Gaussian blur still applies. Any other filters I apply still apply. While we're here, I am going to close this version just for the sake of simplicity and not taking up any extra memory. Okay. This is where the power of PC outdoes a Mac. I hope that made you feel better. Okay. Because Macs can't be fast at all. Never. Anyway, let's go in and let's continue on with filters. Because even though I ran that Gaussian blur filter, there's some things you need to know about filters and smart objects that's actually pretty cool. Let's go up to our filter menu and let's go to our, I don't know, any other one that I want to do. Let's do a, I'm just trying to figure out which one I want to use. Let's do a, let's do, I don't want to do those. All right, yeah, we'll do a lighting effects. Okay, lighting effects. What the heck? Why not? All right, so here we go. This will bring up our lighting effects panel. And I did choose one of the most complicated filters, so bear with it for a second. All right, so we brought up lighting effects. That's also not a great default for this. Do we still have our, I guess we don't. Okay, so let's go ahead and move this around and make this bigger. And we'll reposition this. Lighting effects is pretty cool. I don't use it as much as I should, but it does let you relight your photos as we're seeing now. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I click OK. And it applied the lighting effects. And notice it's applying it, it's also applying it with the stacking order of the effects that I did. So for example, Gaussian blur is the first one I did, so it's at the bottom. Lighting effects is the second one I did, so it's right above it. If I apply another filter, it'll be above that. You can reorder the filters. So you can, because they're non-destructive and because they've been applied to just the smart object, you can change the stacking order of those filters anytime you want. One more thing I was going to do. All right, we're waiting for it to finish rendering this. Thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it. All right. I lost my train of thought. All right, it's done its thing. It was done. It's thinking. But there's one more thing I was going to do or say, and I can't remember what it was. So just remember, your smart object is a container. You can go inside it and physically affect the pixels if you ever need to. If not, you can apply any non-destructive Photoshop features to that object anytime you want. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. It's thinking and doing and changing. I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to stop it, put it out of its misery, and now I'm going to move on. All right, let's say that we open up one more here. All right, we got this one. And I open up this image, and I now want to apply an adjustment to it because I don't want to leave out one of the other oldest forms of non-destructive workflows, and that is adjustment layers. But you know what? I don't want to work on a preview. I'm going to go ahead and license this. Go ahead and do it. Gonna move it up to the top of the panel. Oh, this one's already done. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's preview. I now know the blue checks are the ones that we licensed. So that just happened in Photoshop. I've never seen that before. Yes, I know. Finish syncing. Hurry up. Come on, Internet. Sync faster. All right, we'll do it on this one while we're waiting for that one. We'll use that one as a second layer. Maybe, maybe not. All right, we got that one open, and we'll wait. That one just finished. Okay, great. So now we'll drag this one on as well. Now we'll drag this one on as well. Okay, now it's going to do it. Okay, so I got this one in. Again, it's going to come over as a smart object because I'm dragging it in from stock. No problem. I apply that. Scale it down. Transforming it. And now, let's say I want to do something to this layer that is also non-destructive, but I don't want to actually even do it to the layer itself. As a matter of fact, I'm not even going to have that be a smart object. So let me render that one out first. Let's go to my layer menu, and let's not have that be a smart object. So we'll go to rasterize. So we'll pretend it's destructive for now. So it's not linked anymore. It's just a regular layer. So I want to do some things to the wings that are non-destructive. Well, number one, you can use a mask. Mask or non-destructive is a non-destructive feature. So for example, maybe I want to get rid of the white background, but I don't want to really delete the white background. So what I can do is I can go into my quick select, and I can go in, oh, brush is too big, and we'll just quickly select the white, and I'll just go in and say select, and run that layer. I think Photoshop is finally telling me, hey, you might want to restart me. I'm running low on RAM. All right, but anyway, we're going to go ahead and say, since we only have a few minutes, select similar, which should get all of the white in this layer. It did. And it got a little bit too much, but let's say I didn't see it. Let's say I didn't see that it was encroaching on the top part of the wings. What I can do is I can say I just want to hide the white. I don't want to delete it. I want to do it non-destructively. Well, if you go to your layer panel, at the very bottom of your layer panel, you've got this mask icon. That is add a layer mask. And we've talked about the layer mask before. So if I go ahead and just click add layer mask after I made my selection, that will mask out, in this case, the wings. I want the opposite. So undo, hold down your Option or Alt key, and that tells it to imply an inverted mask. Now it's just hidden the white. Oh, but it got part of the wings that I didn't see right off the bat. Well, because it's non-destructive, meaning that mask does not really permanently delete anything, I can go in with a paintbrush and white paint, and I can paint back in anything that got accidentally selected, like the wings themselves at the top here, because they were close to being white, or they had enough white in them to be selected. Okay, so that is one. I can also get rid of the little halo or line around that image, because all I'm doing is just applying black to the mask. Okay, so that's one way. The other way is that we have this old, I told you layers came out in version 3. Adjustment layers came out in version 4. That was the big new feature in version 4. So if I want to use adjustment layers, I can. So for example, I can go in, and by the way, before we even get to adjustment layers, let's talk about the mask and why that's non-destructive. Because you see when I added the layer mask, it added it as another icon over here. The pixels of the actual wings are still intact, even though that's not a smart object. Yes, you can apply layer masks to smart objects as well. But in this case, I didn't convert it to a smart object. I just added a mask. Everything's non-destructive. I'm hiding and showing parts of the layer non-destructively. If I want to play with the mask, I can hold down my Shift key and click on the mask to temporarily disable it. Notice it has a red X through it. I just held down Shift, clicked right on the mask, hide the mask, turn it off. Let me see the rest of the layer so I can see the original pixels that I have not touched. Hold down the Shift key again, turns it back on. Hold down the Option or Alt key, and that will show you the mask. So I can see, oh, dude, you made mistakes. I can go in and switch to white paint. Oops, sorry, wrong tool. Wrong tool. Brush, brush, brush. Go back to the brush. Go back to the brush. All right, back on the brush. I keep hitting the wrong tool. Sorry, my bad. Back to the brush, and there we go. And we go to white paint, X. And I can see the parts that I messed up on. I still missed. And I can see here, if I go back to black paint now, where I got a little generous around the putting the wings back. So that's allowing me to edit the mask itself, again, without touching the wings. So I can fix the mask and get the mask just right. So that was holding down your Option or Alt key to toggle the mask, to just see the mask and work on the mask without working on the pixels. So that's what a layer mask is. Now, if you're happy with those pixels being gone and you do want to make this permanent, because right now it's still non-destructive, if you save it, it'll still be non-destructive. But if you ever want to apply the mask, meaning get rid of the mask, get rid of those white pixels, make it gone, then right-click, and there is an option called Apply Layer Mask. There's also an option that says Delete Layer Mask. Get rid of it. Bring back the white background. So that is, either option is up to you. Okay, so now let's talk about adjustment layers. Adjustment layers is probably one of the easiest, best ways to work non-destructive. Adjustment layers and effects. So let's go to adjustment layers. That's just under the adjustment tab. And you've got all of these choices for adjustment layers. You've got brightness, contrast, levels, curves, exposure, vibrance, so forth and so on, all of these. So let's say that I want to adjust the exposure. Let's say my wings are too dark. So if I click on exposure, that will automatically give me a new layer called exposure. And it will now allow me to adjust it. But there's going to be one problem with this new layer. Watch what happens. If I adjust the exposure to make those wings brighter, everything gets brighter, because it's affecting adjustment layers work down. So whatever is below the adjustment layer gets affected by default. Now, if you're just trying to affect one layer below and everything else above it you don't want to change, just move your adjustment layer down to the one layer you want to affect. But in this case, that won't work, because I want to affect the wings, which is above the background, and the background's not even a layer yet, and I don't want to affect the background. There's a hidden way to do this. You can, and I'll zoom in first to show it to you. In between exposure and the actual layer I want to affect, if you point, see, you get the little finger? If you point right on that line in between, separating those two, and you hold down your Option or Alt key, watch what the finger does. It changes to this little arrow that says, oh, you just want to apply it to this one layer. No problem. So hold down your Option or Alt key and click. And now it's saying I'm only applying to this one layer. And now only that one layer is controlled by the exposure. So if I make the wings brighter, only that's being applied. nothing else. So now let's go ahead and grab our move tool. And let's grab this layer because it is still affecting only that layer. So I can still pick this layer up and move it around. Move tool, there we go. And pick up our wings. And we'll put our wings there. Maybe something like that. And if I now want to go in to the mask, because it moved the mask with it, I could do something like black paint and mask out part of the wings so the hand is in front. Now I'm overdoing it because I don't know where the hand is. Once I see where the hand is, then I can put the wings back. Switch to white paint, and I can paint back in. And of course I'd zoom in and do a much better job than I have time for right now. But I can put the wings back non-destructively. Remember, the wings are still intact. They're not changed. They still have a white background. They still are the color they are. They're still the exposure they are. I've not done a single destructive thing to the wings themselves. But you would go in and do the job you want it to make it look the way you want it to look. Okay, so now we've got that in place. What's next? What's last? We've got like 6 minutes left. So let's talk about layer effects. Layer effects is another way to work non-destructive. Hello, Dominic. How are you? I want to know, how is this applicable on vector images or not? Everything I'm showing you pretty much can be done with vectors. As a matter of fact, when you drag over things from Illustrator, they automatically come into smart objects. And when you double click to open the container of the smart object, it will go back and open up Illustrator so you can make more changes to it. So for the most part, vectors are even more non-destructive as long as you don't rasterize the layer. So good question, Solomon. All right. Grungy, it's not a matter of why in 2016 do Macs still have RAM issues. It's having enough RAM, period, for the amount of the stuff you're doing. You got to remember, you're looking at one little piece. You don't know what else is running on this machine to make this stream happen. So I'm not having any RAM issues. I'm just using a lot of RAM. And of course, it's using virtual memory and all that good stuff too. But if you do enough stuff on any computer, it'll slow it down. That's what's happening now. Don't worry about it. All right, so let's go in and let's move on to layer effects. So if you go to your effects panel, we got all the standard layer effects we've seen over the years. So you've got bevel and emboss, stroke, so forth and so on. So let's do a couple. Let's do drop shadow, since that's an obvious one that people always do. And when I bring up the layer styles for drop shadow, we can move it out of the way so we can actually see the shadow. And I can move the shadow around. I can physically drag the shadow around in this image. Now, of course, the shadow is not being masked because I'm doing it after the fact. But there you go. There's my drop shadow. Or it's not being masked completely. So, and of course, I can change the opacity and distance and all that good stuff. And the size, so I can make it less of the shape of the wings or more of the shape of the wings, make it more defined. Up to you. And before, you could just click OK, but now I just want to point out that in CC, prior to this update, I could go in and make another layer effect, and I can have as many as I want. But you notice plus signs now? These plus signs are new. What these plus signs mean is that you can also add the same effect more than once now for the first time in Photoshop. So if for whatever reason I needed 2 drop shadows on the same layer, click the plus sign. Now I've got 2 drop shadows. And I can toggle back and forth between them. So drop shadow number 2 could be way over here, even though drop shadow number 1 has not changed. Drop shadow number 2 could have less opacity, even though drop shadow number 1 has not changed. So any of these that have a plus sign can be added, and I can have a 3rd drop shadow, a 4th drop shadow, as many drop shadows as I want that Makes sense. But I can have as many of these effects as needed, and again, all non-destructively. So for example, let's go in and let's say that I also want to apply. Now, bevel and emboss is a one-time thing, meaning it doesn't have a duplicate feature. But if I apply a bevel and emboss, I've now got a nice bevel and emboss on that, so we can make it kind of look more metallic like our robot or our Android friend here. And let's get, oh, hang on. Oh, and the shadow's getting it too. That's because I'm doing the wrong feature. Let's go back to the shadow. I was applying that to the shadow, not the actual. Let's put that back. Let's go to the bevel and emboss. Let's go to the bevel and emboss. There we go. And now we'll make that look a little bit more metallic, maybe. Play around with the gloss contours here. That actually looks the best. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's going to be the one. That's pretty cool, but let's stick with this one. And now we can play with an inner or outer bevel, and I'm almost out of time, so we're going to do this quick. Outer bevel, click OK. And that will apply the layer styles, and notice they're all turned off, gone back into, readjust it, delete it, save with the file, delete with the file. I can continue masking out that little extra line that applied there, all non-destructively inside Photoshop CC. So next up is Beetlejuice, and he is going to talk about, I'm sure, something audio and or video related. I think he's going to do something pretty cool about NAB next week. So with that said, guys, thanks for watching my stream. Thanks for checking in on me today. Same, where we're going to be doing more stuff, more Photoshop, more Lightroom, more things we forgot, things we didn't get to today. So with that, guys, take care. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. And I'm going to toss it over to Beetlejuice. Thanks for watching the replay as well. Cheers, guys.